Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah الذي ألف بالإسلام بين قلوب المؤمنين وأوجب الاتحاد وحرم التفرق في كتابه المبين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله هدى من يشاء إلى صراط المستقيم وأشهد أن سيدنا محمد رسول الله خير داع إلى طريق القويم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه الذين تحدبت نفوسهم وتحدت قلوبهم فكانوا سادة المنصورين. أما بعد، فيا عباد الله، أوصيكم ونفسي أولا بتقوى الله تعالى وطاعته. That is, our praise is due to Allah, who has united the hearts of the believer in Islam and has made it an obligation to remain united, and has made it forbidden to become separated in His clear book. I bear witness that there is nothing worthy of worship except Allah, who guides to the straight path whom He wills, and I bear witness that our leader Muhammad is His messenger and the best caller to the way that is straight. O Allah, send your prayers and your peace upon our leader Muhammad and upon his family and upon his companions, whose hearts were united and whose souls were educated, so that they became victorious leaders. And what follows thereafter, O believers of Allah, I advise you, as I advise myself, to first have the proper regard for Allah and thereafter be obedient to Him. Dear believers, I greet you with the universal greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be with you. We are still discussing the army values, and today we're looking at the value of integrity. And integrity, we know the army value means to do what is right, both legally and morally. And so with this army value, we're going to look at the Prophet Joseph, or the Prophet Yusuf as he's also known. But before that we do that, we're going to kind of reference or connect the story of the Prophet Joseph with the final chapter of the Quran, and we're going to briefly discuss that before we get into the Prophet Joseph. So this final chapter of the Quran says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, malikin nas, ilahin nas, min shari waswasil khannas, alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas, min al-jinnati wan nas. And that's translated as, with the name of Allah, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. I seek refuge with the Lord and cherisher of mankind, the king and ruler of mankind, the God or the judge of mankind, from the mischief of the whisperer of evil, who withdraws after his whisper, the same who whispers into the hearts of mankind, among men and among jinn. So if we listen to the Arabic, and when it's more pronounced in prayer, you can really pick this up. You notice that it says Rabbin Nas, Malikin Nas. This nasally sound, it brings to mind that which is internal. It brings to mind that something within inside of you, because the way those tajweed rules or the pronunciation rules are, that it makes you think of something that's internal. And when it talks about the one who whispers and withdraws after the whisper, the word that is used is waswisu, or waswisu fi sudurin nas. So even in that, it sounds like a whisper. And so this is that whisper that's whispering to that which is inside of you, that God put inside of you. And it talks about the one that is evil. And so often the concept or the name or the idea of shaitan or Satan is thrown around. And we know that shaitan is the Arabic term, and it means to be far away. So it's far away from God's intention. It's far away from what was intended for that which was inside of you. So let's look at the Prophet Joseph. So here we have the Prophet Joseph. He was as a young in his life. He was taken from his homeland. He was taken from his family. And when he was removed, he was placed into bondage. Sounds familiar, right? So he was removed from his homeland and placed into bondage. And after spending some time in bondage, his condition began to improve. His condition did improve to where he soon became someone that was high in stature, and he was able to move within the inner circles of the establishment. And so he had some sort of esteem, a position of esteem. And while he was in this position of esteem where he could move around and people would look at him as something to aspire to, there began to be these whispers. There began to be these influences that were right there in that same circle that were trying to get him to act outside of his nature, trying to get him to move away from what God had established in his life, what God intended him to be, someone that rose from an unjust situation into the highest heights. So this influence, this external influence, would try to seduce him, would try to whisper these things to him to pull him out of his nature. But the prophet Joseph had integrity. The prophet Joseph did not go for it. And we know that in this story, the story of the prophet Joseph, he was a young boy, and his brothers tricked him, dropped him in the well, and we know the conversation with the father. It's played out in the Quran. He was picked up by some travelers. They took him to another location, and as time went on, he became one of the high or one of the trusted counsels of the king or the ruler of that area. And in a moment when he wasn't paying attention, the wife of this ruler sought to seduce him. And so when they were found out, the question or the position that was made to find out if he was telling the truth, if he was acting with integrity, they said that if his shirt is torn from the front, if his facade, if his the way he presents himself, if that's torn from the front, then he is the guilty party. But if it's torn from the back, that means that the other person is the guilty party. So as we look at this idea of integrity, doing what is right, both legally and morally, we see that the prophet Joseph acted with integrity in this regard. He did not fall victim to those whispers, to those suggestions that were trying to remove him or to move him away from who God intended him to be. We see that prophet Joseph, who was taken from his homeland, taken from when he was in a lowly place, put into bondage in an environment that he didn't control the agenda, and rose through the ranks to some level of prominence, he did not fall subject to the external environment that was around him that would cause him to move away from what God intended for him. He acted with integrity. He acted in accordance with his Creator's will. And that's what we have to do, brothers and sisters. We'll go more in depth in the second part. أقول هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه الذين تهذبت نفوسهم وتهبت قلوبهم فكانوا سادة المنصورين أما بعد. Dear brothers and sisters, we are still discussing integrity, and we're looking at the prophet Joseph. So in this, what we find sometimes in our lives, that we may have come to or come from situations that were less than ideal. And as we move from that environment, we came to the military. And then we're going through these different movements. We're going to basic training. We're going to our advanced individual training. And these environments are not situations that we control. It's kind of like we're in bondage. It's kind of like we're being instructed and told what to do and molded to become something that we weren't initially. And as time goes by, as we apply what we're taught, as we move through these different ranks, we begin to accumulate things. We begin to accumulate the different medals, the badges, all these things. We accumulate rank. And we get into a position sometime of leadership. We get into a position of where we are admired by others. People look at us and see us as something to aspire to. But then when we're moving in these circles, whether it's NCO, whether it's officer, warrant officer, when we're moving in these circles, we see there are things in the environment, external influences that are whispering to our nature. Go ahead and do that. Let's do this. Nobody's going to know. Let me say this to this individual. Let me be this way. Let me act like this. These whispers, these influences that are far off from what God wants for you, what Allah wants for you. These influences that are far off are whispering to you. And so what we have to do is be like the Prophet Joseph. We have to be like the Prophet Joseph in that when these influences come to us, we continue to act with integrity. We continue to do what is morally and legally right. Things that are in line with God's intent for us. We should not let these external suggestions, these external ideas influence how we carry ourselves. We should be very aware. The Quran, it says that we should seek refuge with the Lord, with the judge, with the deity, the ruler of that which is inside of us. We should seek refuge. We should ask for the protection of Allah. And we ask for protection from these external forces. We ask protection from these, from our internal that may have been influenced from the external forces. So we have to sometimes get in front of that. So we seek refuge from the one that whispers, or from those whispers, or from those suggestions, because we know it's harder for us to address them once we've gone along with some of these suggestions. And we each have our own suggestions, and one person's suggestions may be different from someone else's, or they may be the same, but the solution is the same: to seek refuge with Allah from the whisperer and the one who withdraws after he whispers. So brothers and sisters, as we go on and we think about how we must carry ourselves, how we must act with integrity, we have to constantly remember the Prophet Joseph. And if we pay attention to that story when we read it, what we're going to find out is that even though when Prophet Yusuf was approached in this manner, and he acted with integrity, he acted in a way that was pleasing to God, and then when he was questioned, he was able to prove that that's what he did. He was able to show that he acted in accordance with God. What happened to him? He found himself ostracized. He found himself locked away. He found himself out of favor with those that, one, face some sort of embarrassment due to him having integrity in that instance, and two, from the environment, that social circle that was trying to influence him. So he was locked away and ostracized. And it wasn't until he was able to be away to himself that the value that he added to that organization, or the value that he added to the one that was in control, or to that social circle, was remembered, and realized that he regained his prominence, that he regained his status. So dear believers, don't think that just because you come from a tough situation and you rose through the ranks that influences won't come to you. We have to act with integrity. And even when we act with integrity, even when we do the right thing, there are still going to be those that are going to try and ostracize you for doing that. Are going to try and ostracize you because you did not move far away from God as they did, or far away from what was legally and morally right as they did. And you may be to yourself, but because you remain steadfast in your integrity, sooner or later your value will be recognized. So don't give up hope on maintaining your integrity. Have faith. Have faith that Allah will bring you through it, and have faith that if your value is not recognized in your current situation, even though you act with integrity, Allah sees you. Allah sees you. And you and that action of showing integrity is going to be counted by Allah. And that is, at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, that's the only time it matters. That's the only time that it matters, is of who approves of your actions. So don't give up, brothers and sisters. Keep that integrity. Keep moving forward. Keep pushing. We pray that this finds you well. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له وبذلك أمرت وأنا أول المسلمين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين.